Alrighty, so all this is about is just introducing us to how we're going to, you don't have to hold them up guys, you can just leave them down and we'll talk about them in a minute. It's introducing us to how we're going to sketch these babies. We're expected to sketch a range board that has a combination of leather, knit, memory?
Leather, knit, woven.
Woven, thank you. Okay, so it's got to have a combination and it can have other fabrications in it as well. If you wanted to have vinyl, if you wanted to have pleather, if you wanted to have gauze, tulle, it can have lots of different fabrications in it, okay? So it's up to you, but we need to talk about how we're going to draw those because we need to draw a range board accurately. That's what this is about. So what we've got in front of us at the moment here is a combination of fully fashioned knits and cut and sew knits. Those of us that are holding fully fashioned knits, hold them up. Does anyone know the difference between fully fashioned knit and cut and sew knit? Yep, talk out loud.
The cut and sew knit is like, they're just pieces of fabric that are cut and then sewn together.
Yep.
And then fully fashioned is they're knitted to shape and then together.
Yep, yep, exactly right. So when you turn your garment inside out, fully fashioned knit are pieces that are on a machine. They are knitted into the exact shape and then they are used or they are linked together using a linking machine. Whereas a cut and sew knit are fabrics that a whole piece of fabric is knitted and then it's cut out in the shape and it is stitched together using a 4-thread or a 5-thread overlocker. Right, you can come in and grab a seat. Yeah, come in and grab a seat. Okay, so that's the difference. That's how you know. Remembering too that sometimes you'll find a combination. Sometimes you'll find a combination of some elements that are linked together, like that's a linked seam there. There's no overlocking, so it's all linked together. Yet here we have a zip inside, which is bound on the edge, which is probably cut and sew method. Okay, so sometimes you find a combination of both, and sometimes you find that it's fully just one type or the other. Okay, so that's what we're thinking when we're talking about the difference between cut and sew and fully fashion. Fully fashion will not have any overlocking on the inside. It will just be, all pieces will be knitted and casted off around the edge and then linked together. Okay, so, but remembering that we can have a combination, cut and sew, fully overlock, you'll see all the overlocking, you'll see all the detail of a sewing machine. Okay. They are your two major differences. Let's start again. Can those of us that are holding fully fashioned knits hold them up? This one here's got the only detail that's different is your zips. Other than that, that's fully fashioned all the way. Okay? So these guys here, let's turn them in the right way again and let's have a bit of a talk about some of the construction detail because they're the two different types of knits that you can include in your range board. Fully fashioned, cut and sew. Okay? So the difference is the way they're sketched. When you look at a fully fashioned, we're going to look at, for instance, the one in the middle that Scott's holding, which is a Hurley jumper. That has got ribbing on the neck, ribbing around the cuffs of the sleeve, and ribbing on the hem. Alrighty. The two things that you won't notice, but I'm going to tell you, is the ribbing on the hem is grown on. It's knitted in that way. So when we turn this ribbing inside out, there's no seam here. It's the knitting machine that knits in one style, which is a rib, and then changes its knit pattern to go into a cable. Okay? But what we do notice at the neck, when we turn the neck over, is that there's a linked seam on the neck. So that actually does have, it's cast off and stops around the neck. Then there's a strip of rib that's then stitched on and linked on around the neck. The way we draw those are slightly different, okay? Because this is grown on and there's no seam there, we'll either draw a really light grey seam so that there's just the image of a seam, but it's not really a seam, so you can see that there's a change in knit pattern, or we don't draw any seam at all and we leave our print, or we draw our print inside so that you can see that it's a rib changing to a cable knit, okay? Different though, because there is a linked seam around this neckline here, you would actually draw a seam into it. Okay, so when you're doing fully fashioned knit, you've got to be thinking, is this grown on? Is it linked on? Is there going to be a seam? Is there not? because if some, and it really, you know, communication when you're drawing a tech pack as well, so you'd figure it out. But even so, if you did draw a seam through that bottom part, the factory that you're working with would probably query it and say, do you really want a seam there? Can I grow it straight on? You know, so it would figure itself out. But yeah, it saves time. With a piece like that, if you don't need to link on a seam, you do around your neck because it's round and you want to keep that shape. But if you don't want to have a seam there, it saves time. It's one less part in the process. You know, it means that the machine can do all the work for you and you don't have to do different steps on the production line to get re-linked in, okay? And the same with the sleeves. This one here, you'll notice the sleeves, there's no linking seam in there. The way you check, turn it inside out, have a look at your garments, no linking seam. So when you draw it, just keep that in mind, okay? You can either use a really greyed out or a really transparent line to show that difference, or put your print fill in there to show a rib coming into a cable or whatever you've got. At the end, what have we got at the end here?
Very similar.
Sorry?
Very similar.
Very similar. It's a grown on rib, same deal. Looked around the neckline, it's linked on around your neckline. So we draw it very similar. Just remembering you've got to think about things like if this is coming into a mitre corner at the centre front neck, you know, how we're going to make sure we draw our mitre line in. That's a little bit of a cut and sew just in that factor there, that's hand sewn back onto itself. So there's a little bit of cut and sew just in that little front mitre. Alrighty, so just thinking about those things. And what's the last one we've got on the end? Okay, having a look at this one and seeing, we'll just get it turned the right way for me. Because this one's got a bit of a combo of both, but it's also got different knit patterns on it and different paneling, and it's quite complex in the way that it's structured. So you've got to think about that, and if that's what you want, you know, drawing in your light grey lines, because in most aspects of this one, it's just this is all one piece, and it's just your knit that's come from plain into a cable, into some kind of mossy knit, back into a cable, into a plain. So it's one piece, but it's just the knit pattern that's changed. When you sketch that up, you would have to sketch that print into it. I mean, not print in that knit into it, because you'd never be able to guess all of it. Even if you drew lines there, you'd never guess that it was looked like that. So you'd need to put, you know, draw your print, your knit structure into it to be able to see. Remember that you need to draw in your zips, you know, and all of that kind of detail around about it. Now have a look at this one too, because this one's got some of the seam structure coming to the good side of your fabric. So you need to draw that and show that. You know how there's a lot of jumpers that look like they're inside out but they're not? Okay, so which is what's going on here. So if that's what's going on here, then you need to remember you need to put in your thick lines. You might want to put a different brush stroke on them to show that they're a bit fuzzy, that they're actually a seam to the outside. Put a bit of weight onto them, change the shape of the stroke. So instead of the stroke being a solid line, you might want to make it into one of those whoopie lines. You know, there's all different types of strokes you can change it to. So think about all those things. Is what I'm saying making sense to you guys? Because I don't know if, you know, when I'm using my terminologies that you're in the same. if I'm speaking terminology that you don't understand, put your hand up, let me know and I can explain it. Because I'm talking illustrator talk a lot. So, yeah, so just being mindful of that. Being mindful of when you're sketching, for instance, a rib. If it's a chunky rib, you need to draw it like it's a chunky rib. If it's a really thin, which show the end, the green one on the end, yeah, that's a really fine gauge, a really small rib, okay? Once again, Scott's got a chunky rib on his as well. So if it's chunky, draw it chunky. If it's fine, draw it fine. You've got to be able to draw and imitate what you expect them to see and to show you. Okay, so you just need to think about that. Think about your shapes. Cut and sew, people. Let's have a look at what you've got. We might throw a few more cut and sews into the mix as well while we're here.
Sorry, Tina, when you said like mitre edge, like with the green one at the end, what did you mean by that?
The centre front neck is a little V. So, so that's that V I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I've got to look for the camera. That's that V I'm talking about here, right in the centre front. Okay, so when you two different angles join together, there's different ways you can join them together. One way would be to overlap them and to bring them into the seam, which I think I might have somewhere to show you, and bring them into the seam. Another way is to put a seam in the middle to join it to get rid of all that excess. and that's called a mitre. If it's at a 45-degree angle, it's called a mitre. So, well, let's have another look. Yeah, this is a good one. Another mitre. There you go. But cut and sew.
How do you spell that?
M-I-T-R-E. Alrighty, so we've got some cut and sews up here. Okay, tell me, you guys, audience participation, you guys can tell me, what do you expect to see drawn on a cut and sew knit? Tell me what you know.
You have the double, sorry,
Yeah,
double line for the cover stitch.
Yeah, cover stitch, twin needle cover stitch. So when you're drawing that, you need to make sure that you've got your twin needle to show, which is 2 lines next to each other, 2 dashy lines. You can set up a twin needle in your brush stroke so that automatically does that for you if you want to, as a brush stroke or a pattern stroke, so that it will automatically put that in and it'll save you doing it. Another really handy one to set up as a brush stroke or pattern stroke is the bindings. We've got an orange cami here that's got a binding on the neckline. You can set that with the 2 solid lines and then your top stitch as a small one or as a thick one. There's on the end is another binding, a thicker binding on the stripy top on the end. Okay, so you can set that up as a brush stroke so it drops in. A lot easier to set up these few of these brush strokes. Keep them in your library. You'll use them all the time. Okay. So cover stitch. What do we need to know about cover stitch? Talk to me. When we think about proportion, scale, size, what do we need to know about cover stitch? How the distance? How wide is your cover stitch? Is your cover stitch? That's a good one because it's light. That's a light one too. How far away? Is it 2 centimeters away from your hem? Is it 1 centimeter? Is it 3 or 4 or 5 centimeters away from your hem? And proportional wise, you need to stitch that adequately as well. So you need to get your scale correct on that. So if it's a really wide hem, I want to see a really wide hem. If it's a really, just a normal 2 centimeter hem, if it's probably wouldn't do a 5 mil hem, but if it's a 5 mil hem, same deal. Likewise with your bindings. For instance, that cami one is a really skinny little bind. If you're going to draw that, okay, so if you're going to imitate that bind, that's a skinny bind, it's only a 6 mil bind, show it as being a skinny bind. If it's going to be a wide bind like that neckline on that stripy top, you know you need to draw the scale and proportion. These are the things that you'll be marked on, you know, keeping your scale and the proportion right. What have we got? Let's move along to this one over the edge here. Okay, so this bind here has got a twin needle around the edge of it. So that's got a twin needle on the bind. That bind on the edge there only has a single needle. Okay, so think about your construction and your bind and how you're doing it. Once again, mitre. Have a look at this mitre though. All they've done is literally sewn it as a strip through, pinched out, and then back tacked in their mitre and left all the bulk on the inside. Okay, so depending on how bulky your fabric is, that's a highly acceptable way of doing it. A lot of t-shirts are like that, so you can keep it that way too. What have we got here? We've got a polo shirt. Okay, so having a look at our polo shirt, how's it constructed at that back neck? What's that back neck showing me on the inside? What can you see around that collar seam?
2 rows of stitching, is it?
Yeah, so what is covering it? What's covering that seam? There's a binding on top of it, okay? So if you can see your back view from your front, you need to be drawing in that bind or thinking about how you're going to finish it off.
That's really this turtleneck that has that same sort of double stitch covering the binding. Would that be some?
That's actually a bound edge on it,
Oh.
yes. Yeah, but the beauty of that is from a perspective of a turtleneck, you'd never see that inside workings, so you don't need to draw it. But if you were writing your make page, you'd absolutely have to write that they've bound that neckline seam. Yeah, so just think about what you can see from the outside to the inside. The one that Scott's got here, is it on the back or the front? It's bound on the back but not on the front, so but you can't see the front, so you're pretty safe on that. But yeah, just have a think about how you're going to sketch them before you before you go for gold. Any other questions on stitching together knits? Okay, yeah,
How do you draw a cover stitch?
just a twin needle. Just
So, like,
two
just
dashy
little
lines.
right.
So draw two dashy lines next to each other, or you can actually set up a brush swatch or a pattern stroke swatch as well.
Like that.
Yes, yep, just like that. Yeah, two dashy lines parallel with each other. Yep. But if you can set up them in your strokes or your swatch little box, then they'll drop it. You can draw a line and then assign them to that swatch, and they'll automatically drop in. If you don't know what I mean by that, come and see me. I can talk you through it.
How far apart would you do them relatively close?
Remember your scale. So
Yeah,
when you draw
yeah.
on your screen, it's all nice and big.
Yeah.
When you're all the time, what you're doing when you're drawing on the screen is you're bringing then once you've drawn in what you think, scale that back to imagine it's printed onto an A4 size. Can you see those two lines visibly, or have they blurred into one? Okay, that's what you're always doing. You're always sketching big, and then zoom it back in to imagine that you're on your screen. It's kind of like it would be on an A4 tech pack kind of size, and then to have a look to see whether you can visibly see it. All of your construction detail must be visible. So you've got to keep zooming out, zooming in, zooming out, zooming in to actually be able to see real life, real time, what it's going to look like on your, and that goes for weight as well. You know how much weight you're allocating to your top stitching, because if you're allocating 5.5 to your top stitching, and when you zoom it back in to be A4-ish size, it disappears and you can't see it. You need to be putting 0.75 on it instead, so that you can, remembering that's because that's the real life. The real life is that picture scaled down to stick on an A4 page. That's where you're going to be at. So, or your A3. For you guys, it's a range board, so it's A3. It's not tech packs. So, but it's still zooming back into the size that's appropriate to what your outcome is. Okay. So really, it depends. If you're keeping it big, then you can weight it heavy. You can, spread them further apart. But if you're zooming it in small, just always be checking. And there's nothing I can't tell you. 3 mils, 4 mils apart, and yeah, you've got to zoom it back in and out. Depends on the weight you're using as well. So yeah. Any other questions? My top tip would be look at what you're wearing. Okay. Always go back. Always look at what you're wearing. Go through your wardrobe. Say, oh, my wardrobe's got a rib. My wardrobe's got a plain knit. Have a look at it. My t-shirts, my hoodies. How are the cords? If you're going to do a hoodie, how are the cording? How is that exposed zip drawn? All of that kind of stuff. If you're concerned about the size of your pockets or whatever, go back to your wardrobe. If you're going to draw jeans, have a look at your jeans. Have a look at how the pocketing is and what side is my coin pocket. Where is the top stitching detail? Where are my rivets? Always go back to your wardrobe, check it out. And then the next best place is Pinterest and Pinstagram. Pinstagram? No. Pinterest and Instagram. Man, that was a word tumble. Okay, so always look at Pinterest and Instagram. They are awesome for detail that you can zoom in and out of to see what's going on. Okay, so use your sites. And the most primo site for getting fills and prints and brushes, WGSN. Nothing beats WGSN. If you want to put a plain knit, for instance, this might be the jumper that you're drawing. If you want to plonk a plain knit fill in that, go to WGSN. They have swatches of knits and all different kinds of knits, of cable knits, of plain knits, of moss knits, of anything that you could possibly imagine. Go to WGSN, copy one of their download one of their swatches, use it as your swatch fill. Okay, just remember scale. When you're dropping in that into your picture, don't leave a big scale on it so it looks inappropriate. Scale it so it looks similar to what your garment and your expectation is at the end. Okay? And everyone knows what I mean by scale? If you don't, come and ask me afterwards and we can chat about it. Alrighty?
So obviously you mean so if you had this,
I don't want to see
huge,
massive, so you've only got 3 rows. That would look more like a cable knit. But I want to see tiny, skinny little rows. All through the whole lot. And remember, if you are going to put, because it's knits, you can. If you are going to put fills on top of this, make sure your fills are a little bit transparent so you can see. Like for instance, if you had this baby here, so you can see all your detail and your seaming. So you can, yes, you might put a fill on it to fill it in all the spaces. But make sure you can always see your construction detail, because we want to see that construction detail and hear about it. Okay? And the only other thing that I haven't talked about, sorry, I should have, is knits. You know, elasticated knits. Remember your leggings or other things, they'll have elastic put into them. That's just cover stitched in. So when you draw them, you really do draw them just with the cover stitch line. Depending on how loose they are, we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to our leather. If they're a little bit looser, you might want to put some gather marks in them. But really, as you can see from this here, it's actually quite flat. There's no gathers in that, these leggings. Okay, so yeah. But just like my top tip would be, look at your wardrobe. Check out your wardrobe, see what you've got in your wardrobe, and copy it basically. Monkey see, monkey do. Any questions? Okay, we're going to swap C to leather.